Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger potion.
So simple.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome back to the InSession Film Podcast. I'm Ryan McQuaid.
And I'm Jay Ledbetter.
And we are returning after a long kind of hiatus
The people demanded it.
The people were demanding it. They were like all over the streets. They were, there was the writer strike, and then there was the Wong Kar-wai Movie Series defenders that were all online. They were just like, where is Jay and Ryan talking about Wong Kar-wai? Well, here we are. We're back. And apologies to the listeners. We've had scheduling stuff and life and everything's busy.
Hand up. It was
me. No one needs to be. Hey, I'm the same way. We were supposed to do one last week, and I had something that came up as well too, Jay. So it's not just you; it's both of us. But we're here now. That's all that matters. Is that we're here now, and we're getting into the meat of the Wong Kar-wai series. We're right in the middle of this sandwich, and we're here to talk about Happy Together. One film away from talking about In the Mood for Love.
Yeah.
Which we will talk about sometime soon. Yeah.
It's exciting to be back. I mean, let me just say, again, we were out for a while. Certainly all these sort of exterior factors playing there. But I want the people to know that skipping a month of Wongs does not make a right. And I think we need to keep that in mind. And we apologize for it. I mean, there's just nothing else to say about it. So
I think you should apologize for that damn joke.
We're happy that we're back. We're happy that we're together. And so therefore, what an apt film to have here. But you mentioned the writer's strike. Boy, oh boy, is it harder to prepare for a podcast when you don't have people writing your reviews for you. I mean, it is crazy.
It's also really hard to do a review when you don't have your notes.
I can't find my notebook.
You can't find it.
Can't find my notebook.
Jay carries it around. What is it? A Cyrano?
It is a notebook? Cyrano promotional FYC notebook from a couple of years ago. I ran out of all my other notebooks, and I was like, all right, I'll bust out the Cyrano notebook. I mean, thank God they did that. That was money well spent on that awards campaign for Cyrano. Really good stuff.
I think I have one for My Policeman from last year.
Oh, another one. They just knocked it out of the park.
I mean, two movies that like everyone's talking about.
Was
specifically
Cyrano,
My Policeman.
Cyrano wasn't Amazon, was it?
I thought it was. Wasn't it?
Maybe it was.
Amazon?
It was like the
Focus?
partnership with
Focus. Yeah.
They love giving you notebooks, I guess.
Hey, what good are notebooks? As David Byrne would say. But yeah, no. Your notes are in the wind. And so you're just gonna have to free solo this, I guess, on this review.
Yeah.
For Happy Together, which is the latest film in our Wong Kar-wai movie series. What was the last one we talked about? Fallen Angels?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Movie that you can go and listen to, you can watch. We were kind of divided on that one, Jay.
I was gaga for it. I was head over heels.
Goo goo? I don't know.
Yes,
I don't know. I'm just
you were goo goo for it. I was gaga for it.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
I don't like that movie nearly as much as Jade does, but I feel that today we might be on track and maybe liking this together. We'll see. I don't know actually your thoughts on this one, so this will be interesting. But of course, the film is directed by Wong Kar-wai. It stars Leslie Chung and Tony Young. It is about a couple who take a trip to Argentina, but both men find their lives drifting apart in opposite directions. That's kind of loosely what it is about, but this is one of his bigger titles. One of I think two films over the next. This one in the Mood for Love, along with Chungking Express. Those are the three films I think he is primarily known for. So this is a big review for us to. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, those three. You have to narrow. If like
that might be right.
Average film fan. Yeah,
I didn't realize this one was held in that high of regard.
Yeah, it's pretty significant because it's
certainly culturally significant.
Yeah, I was going to say culturally significant because of the subject matter of a gay couple. And this movie is made when in like 1997. So yeah, it's a pretty big landmark of a film. So Jay, I'm curious because we haven't talked in a while about Wong Kar-wai.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked about this movie specifically. What are your thoughts on Happy Together?
It's almost unfair when you do these series because you can get spoiled when you watch just a bunch of very great movies, and I watched Fallen Angels, I watched Chungking Express. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening here? This is unreal. And then you watch this movie, which I would call very, very good. And at the end, I find myself thinking like, I didn't like that as much as the others. That was one of my first thoughts. And I'm going to do my best to talk about this movie in a vacuum because it is a moving, beautiful film in many ways. It lacks some of the trademarks that we've seen in the previous films. I kind of appreciate some of the new approaches that he is taking from a style and storytelling perspective. And I'm not going to let the shadows of those other films that I flat out love shape how I talk about this one. It's just just kind of a strange thing that I thought of as I was preparing for this review. But that out of the way, all right? Not talking about anything else anymore. We're talking about Happy Together. Happy Together is this super restrained film. It again, like I said, lacks many of the more overt stylistic flourishes of Wong's previous films, but that's totally intentional and makes this a much more grounded film in many ways than some of his others. The heartache of the film and the swoons of passion feel all the more potent at points because of this shift in style. And interestingly, kind of the biggest change that he makes here from his previous films is we're not in Hong Kong. We are in Argentina.
Yeah.
We are moving from Hong Kong to Argentina, which gives the whole affair a bit of an outsider's point of view. Love is lost in this very unfamiliar place, which gives this real sense of unease. The one person that is grounding Yu Fei and Po Wing is stripped away, and now they're completely untethered to this place. And it's also interesting to see in this film that Wong is not using the intricate, multi-layered storytelling here. This is about two people, almost exclusively, until later in the film we get this disruptive third person, Chang. And he's the one who actually kind of propels the emotional, ambiguous ending of this film. It kind of lulls you into this sense that you know where the story is going because it is so narrow in its focus, and then it totally takes a turn on you and surprises you in ways that you totally didn't see coming. And I really love that element of the film as well. And interestingly, in some of my readings, because I'm reading my book. I might not have my notes, but I got my book.
He's got his book.
And in that book, it's mentioned that a lot of people see this as a very powerfully political film. They're using the displacement of our two main characters as a metaphor for Hong Kong's loss of identity after it was handed over from Britain to China.
Yeah.
Hard for me to speak to that. I just do not know that history well enough, but it is a really thought-provoking idea on the surface, and I think that's really compelling. And there's this kind of weird, interesting, again, I'm using the word interesting too much, but interesting quote from Wong where he says that also one of the reasons he chose to move the story to Argentina is, in his words, for him, homosexuality was the other end of the world and thus a particularly interesting subject. Just a fascinating little quote there from Wong. But as usual, when it comes to Wong's films, there is a lot to unpack. It's a bold, progressive, culturally important film, like we said, that deals with very flawed, messy characters with an incredible amount of respect and humanity. And he imbues the story with a great deal of melancholy and, you know what? Maybe the first time he's ever thrown this in here, but a sense of longing. Longing.
Yeah. I think that's pretty accurate, Jay. But I do like this
All right,
movie.
podcast over.
I do like this movie, I think, a little bit more than you. This is one that really clicked all the way through. First one to do that since Chunking Express, for me. I was quite moved by it, and I think it's a tragedy, obviously, for sure, and it's also quite complicated. It's a very complicated movie because
The ending.
it's
is
not
crazy.
just as simple as like two people falling in and out of love. This is a very toxic and almost at times abusive relationship emotionally, and you can tell physically over time that they have gone through the rounds between the two of them. I mean, it's not a pretty portrait of love. We've seen that in
No.
his movies before. We'll see that in some movies that we'll talk about over the next couple weeks.
You don't think this is a healthy relationship?
Oh no! Like, this is not a healthy.
He can't
relationship.
even joke about it. It's
I can't even joke about
so
it. No,
not,
honestly,
yeah.
you can't. I don't think that it's. I mean, honestly, I get it though. It's a lot of what we talked about with Fallen Angels, a little bit too. It's like this relationship is toxic, but the idea of being alone is much more worse than the idea of them, of the participation within this relationship. Like, these two have separated. We see it right at the beginning of the film. They have argued and fought and everything, and they are separated. They're sort of, Po Wing is sort of like teasing him, is going out with all these people, and Yun Fei is played by Tony Young, who I think is fantastic in this movie, as well as Leslie Chung, but I think they both are. He's just kind of trying to forget him. He's trying to go through his life, but he can't because he keeps popping up, or he keeps he keeps showing up at his work. And it's only when Po Wing gets hurt, he kind of has to nurse him back to health. They have moments, right? And that's what's interesting about this movie, and that's what's so interesting about Wong Kar-wai, is that it's not just the same beat, right, over and over and over and over and over again until there's a fallout, right? It's weaved on this river or roller coaster of one moment it could be good, the next moment it could be bad, the next moment it could be catastrophic, the next moment it could be tender, and that's really how relationships are. They're not, it's not a string like a movie. It's not a string of convenient or, beautiful things then mixed in with, one complicated thing at the end that tears them apart. Then they come back together and then roll the credits, and roll happy together. No, that's not how it works. You know what I mean? Like, it's very layered and detailed into the dysfunction of these two people being together. And I admire that a lot by Wong Kar-wai. And I admire the fact that he's not trying to make the case that these two should be together. He is making the case that being lonely is far worse than anything else. And and that's where I think the Chang character, played by Chang Chen, he's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary character because, we think of him as, oh, he's going to come in and then like he's going to make his move on Chang and everything, but it's really about getting him out of this rut and pushing him forward into realizing that, yes, you can be alone and it's not necessarily a terrible thing. You can still live a fulfilled life. You can find something down the road. Going back to that relationship is not always the answer, because that continues to be the answer for him for the majority of the film. I think the movie is beautifully shot. I think that there's some great imagery when it comes to, is it Niagara Falls, right? Or am I
No, at
is
the
that
end,
right?
it's
what is it?
think
It's
I
not
have it
Niagara
here.
Falls. It's
No, it's like the southernmost
it's someplace
point
there.
of,
Yeah. But anyway, it's these beautiful shots of this
or
this
no,
water.
are they the Brazilian falls? I can't remember.
Maybe they are. Yeah. But I was just thinking of Niagara Falls because that's what it kind of looked like. But it was definitely like somewhere in South America. And I think at the ending too, the fact of like the picture, right? Taking of the picture, and and losing that friendship, or not being able to see that person. It's heartbreaking. It's a very heartbreaking movie. I think of Po Wing going back to the apartment, thinking that he's just always going to be there, right? And this is what happens in relationships like that. You just lean on that. If anything goes bad, you can just go back to the way it was before. Nothing happened. And that's not what this movie does. That's what this movie does. It shows that that's not a reality. That's not always going to be the case. It's a very thought-provoking film. It is progressive for what it is. I will say that it is not a it's not the easiest depiction or simplest depiction of homosexuality I've ever seen, because it's not trying to be that. It's trying to be a relationship more than it is trying to be about like an issue movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's just being about these two
it's
people.
incidental to the plot, really.
Yeah, I mean, this could have been about a straight couple or a lesbian couple or whoever, and the issues would still remain about toxicity and loneliness. And so I really, really think that it's a little bit of a smarter movie, even though it is more stripped back than the other films that we've talked about before. And I think that is an interesting quote that you bring up about Wong thinking that homosexuality is on the other side of the world and everything, because I mean, that's not surprising given, how homosexuality is treated on the other side of the world than we are.
There was another quote
Jay?
where he said basically in Hong Kong, you never saw that. If you did see gay characters, it was treated as a joke. And he said, I wanted to upend that. So it seems like he was challenging himself in many ways, both personally and challenging the industry, which is cool.
It's not a perfect depiction, but neither is life. It's not nothing's going to be perfect about this. And also too it's still not something that's, I mean, a lot of movies from Hollywood that even have a gay character or a suggestive gay character, those movies aren't screened in cinemas. And we're talking about blockbusters. You know what I mean? So it's still something that's very much an issue overseas. So I think it's a really, really good movie, and it's quite heartbreaking one, I would say.
Yeah, and I mentioned that the characters being gay was totally incidental to the film. I want to backtrack that a little bit and say that it's not completely incidental, but it is not the entire focus of the movie. Like you were saying, right?
No,
it's
it's about the characters.
It's not an issues movie.
Yeah, it's not about them being gay. It's about them. It's about their relationship forward with the actions and everything. No, I agree with you on that. Yeah.
And I think it definitely shapes Yu Fei's demeanor specifically. I think you see that repression that is caused by the way that, if not the way that the world sees him, the way that he thinks the world sees him. And I think Tony Leung captures that incredibly well. And he's definitely proven to be kind of Wong Kar-wai's secret weapon. You put Tony Leung as a lead in a Wong Kar-wai film, and you're in for something pretty special. And you brought up Chang and his place in the film. I think what I love so much about his character is, you talked about how the film is largely about this idea that the only thing worse than being in a toxic relationship is being completely alone. And Chang, to me, how my impression of his character is that he hasn't experienced that love that you want to come back to, even if it means going back to some of the worst experiences of your life. The highs of it are so high that you want to return for that, if nothing else. My impression of Chang is that he hasn't even gotten there yet. So he's scared of taking that jump and going blindly towards someone that he is very attracted to. And he is as repressed as anybody in this film in a very different way. He wants to understand what that feeling is like, as opposed to the other characters who desperately want to recapture that moment that they already have. Warts and all, they love each other, and they understand that it's impossible to fully strip that love away once it has been established. So he is Chang holds a very interesting place in this film in that regard. And again, he ends up being really the motivation behind the places that the film goes at the end. And I think the ending, you can imagine in your mind 600 different ways that the movie goes forward after that ending, and none of them would be wrong. You know, it is such a fascinating way to approach the finale of this film, which has been about going back into this toxic relationship. But Yufei has finally, to the extent that he can, stripped himself out of that situation. And really what was holding him in Argentina as much as anything was he didn't have the money to go back to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And so he finally has that ability, and he knows that he should leave, even if he is drawn like a magnet back to his former love. He can now go far enough away that pull is impossible. That attraction is impossible to crawl back to as easily as he did when they were in the same space. And so because of that, the world has kind of completely opened up in ways that it hasn't for years and years when he's been in Argentina. And that implies endless possibility, which is the result that you feel at the end of this film, endless possibility. And it's a great ending.
It is. I mean, I just think of those scenes with Chang because it's not really about temptation. It's not about a lot of other movies I think would be so focused on on Chang being the object of desire. Chang being the guy he wants to sleep with, right? And wants to fall in love with. And then maybe that is the case or something. It's not about that at all. It's about, honestly, him spending time with him so he's not by himself. To get through the day is to have enough money, like you say, Jay, to go home. Because he spent all this money getting them both there to Argentina. And now they're stuck on this, he's stuck on sort of this endless cycle of going back to his former love, leaving, then blowing up, having these moments. And I really appreciate Wong Kar-wai giving the audience and giving us those moments that it is to show you that this is a cycle. This is something they've done many times before. This is how they've gotten into this. There are great moments, and you think it, Jay, I know this. When I was watching it, there were moments where I was just sitting there. I was like, oh, he's going to turn. He's going to, the relationship's going to turn for the best or turn for the worst or whatever. And every time you think it's going to zig, it zags. You know what I mean? Every time it zags, it zigs. And it goes, and it keeps you kind of unpredictable.
It never reaches those truly melodramatic, like super
it's not
extremes. It oscillates in the middle.
Yeah. There's moments where, yes, they blow up, but it's completely random what next emotion you're going to see between the two of them. 1 minute they're dancing, the next minute they're throwing cigarettes at one another. And 1 minute someone is getting power played and the other one isn't. And it's not like traditional, movies about power play. It's about really it's about these two people that have seemingly hurt one another. And something is being unsaid, or just time has turned them into these two beings where if they're around other people, they're totally different, but they know each other so well and what drives under their skin that they can flip. I mean, you're talking about, these sequences where like Po Wing wants to go out, right? Just to go buy cigarettes. So what does Li Fei do? He just essentially buys a ton of cigarettes so he can't leave. So he's trapped there, and he gets so angry. And and he throws them all around the room. Then he picks them up. Tables flip moments later. You know what I mean? And I find that really interesting because of the fact that I find it really interesting because of the fact that that's how relationships are. Over time, you learn about your partner so much. You know what makes them happy, but really what fundamentally Jay, is what can piss them off. and what could turn them off.
Yeah.
And these two are playing each other like a fiddle. And so when they finally separate, right, when this is the final separation,
Mm-hmm.
we don't really see a lot of Po Wing because he's drifting, he's gone. The movie is completely focused on Tony Leung throughout this film, and we get those moments with Chang at the restaurant, and we really get to see the fact that this man wants to go home, yes, but really is not good being by themselves and needs someone that's going to give them pure compassion and a pure open heart and inspiration, that when he's not taking that photo for me, I think, Jay, at the end of Chang, as like, oh, I this is my long lost love. It's I don't know if I'll ever see my friend again. I probably know how to get a hold of him, but till then I have this photo and I have of this person that inspired me to get out of my situation, go home, and reassess my life. And now I'm happy. The movie's title is clearly, I think, a little bit of like an oxymoron, because by the end he's happy by himself, not happy together. You know what I mean? And he's happy that he was able to kind of blossom into the person that he really should be, rather than what he was in this relationship. And then you just suppose that to Po Wing and how he's still figuring that out. He's still a moth to the flame, essentially, of this toxicity. And that scene where he's in the apartment and everything's cleared out and he knows he's gone, it's that recognition of, I'm never going to see him again. And at that point, it is officially over. And his sense of loneliness is truly heartbreaking as well. So it's a really, really beautiful film. And it's in one that's probably his most simplistic one. On, like, there's not a lot of there's not a lot of meaning, or there's not a lot of ambiguity, I think, to this movie. But I honestly think
Not
it's
until
one
the
that
end, yeah.
Not until the end. Yeah. But I honestly think that, like, it's kind of the right move for him at this point to kind of once again strip it back after Fallen Angels, kind of go back to just focusing on three characters, essentially, and really just making it a strong drama about these characters. And yes, I think the move to another country aesthetically works wonders for him, because this movie,
Yeah, I agree,
is really well shot and it's very intimate. You could feel like the movie, while it is about, I think, toxicity, it's also very intimate in the way it's shot and the way
and brick.
Yeah,
and that changes the color scheme.
Yeah.
So it's not even that it's less stylish, although I would say maybe it is a little less stylish.
Yeah.
But it's really just the color scheme is so much less in your face. Like Fallen Angels and even Chungking Express to a certain extent can occasionally look like science fiction movies, which I love, and it is totally Wong Kar-wai trying to leave his stamp on those movies in way like this. No one else could have made this movie this way, and you could see somebody making this movie in a similar way, because this is a little more austere than what he has put together. It's certainly more from a style perspective. I think it's more in the vein of his first couple films, as far as the worlds that these people are occupying feel more grounded, while also having these. It's almost like they're emotionally stylized, because there is this expressionistic tendency to the ways that these people are feeling that Wong is so good at manipulating. And oftentimes you'll hear people complain about a director manipulating the audience. I think in many ways that is the primary job of a director. And Wong is an absolute master of that. And he does it in ways where you don't feel it. Like, I understand people sometimes watching a Spielberg movie and kind of rolling their eyes like, all right, Steve. Okay. All right. I
All right,
see what
Mr.
you're trying to do
Schmaltzy.
here. I see your gears. I see the gears moving. And with Wong, you never really feel that because it's always very complicated. It's not just I want your heart to swell up 5 sizes here because of the intense catharsis that we're feeling in this moment. It's always, like we were saying, it's this messy middle. It's this hazy middle. And in this film, it's people who feel out of place and people who have lost the one thing that makes them feel like they are in some sort of familiar world. And because they have lost that, there's this longing to find something else, whether that is finding something new, like going to the southernmost point in South America, or whether that is going back to something familiar, like going back to Hong Kong. That there's just, again, complicated is the way that I would describe almost every Wong Kar-wai film, and they're not that way from a plot perspective. Although there are still times, I do love this about his films, but it's just such a crazy tendency that he has. There are times where a scene will happen completely unannounced, and then it's only later where they explain why that scene existed. It's a very weird quirk that Wong has in his films, and it keeps you on your toes. From an emotional perspective, from a tracking the plot perspective, it all just keeps you on your toes. Even when the structure feels more familiar, like it does here, from a narrative perspective. And this is not a plotty movie whatsoever. Most of his films aren't. But he always keeps you on your toes as far as style, as far as emotion, characterization, and here structurally, because at this point it had become a little par for the course to have those interweaving stories. You had Pulp Fiction turning that into a fairly mainstream way of telling stories in the 90s, and so that was old hat a little bit. So for him to go back to this is almost the unexpected choice. Going to a more traditional narrative was more unexpected. And even if it can be still a little hard to follow at times, it's much easier than some of his other films. I don't ever consider any of them really. Maybe Ashes of Time. I'm like, okay, can we go back a minute? Maybe you could explain that. But most of them you can totally get.
Can we wrap it up? Let's take a turn back time.
Can we hit back one scene? No, go to scene selection. Actually, let's go back 6 scenes.
Actually, just
and pull up the Wikipedia page, please.
Actually, get Wong to sit next to you and explain his process while he's making the film.
Yeah, can we get Wong on the line? But he just has a very unique way of telling stories and capturing the humanity of his characters. And he hasn't done it in any of his other films. And there's no judgment towards any of the people in his films. There's just a sense, a desire to understand, even if Wong can't fully get there or the audience can't fully get there. There's this desire to do so. And I think that is important. And I think that is unique in many ways to Wong.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I just think about even the moments of happiness, Jay, in this, like the scene where they're dancing in the apartment, right? Which is the iconic sort of shot of
moments.
This. Yeah, the little moments of that. They're so sad. They're so sad because they are little moments. They are complete fragments in what is left of.
They're fleeting.
Yeah, they're very. You're hanging on by a thread in the moments, because you just know it's kind of boiling up a little bit. But they're in there purposefully to give, not of like it's a tragic love story, but more of like, maybe there is a little hope that this can turn, but then in reality, we know as an audience, it's not going to be like that. But yet those movies those shots in this movie are beautiful, and tender, romantic, but heartbreaking, because this is a fragment, and it's giving the audience a little of what they want, but him also saying, "You're getting this, but you need to understand this is going away for both of them, and they're never going to get back to this 100%." I think of the opening scenes where it's this very, it's one of the more interesting opening scenes, the sex scene.
Yeah, it is. That is an announcement that, yes, I think it's a brilliant way to start the movie, especially in 1997.
It is, because it's not played for lust. It's played for power dynamics completely for me in that
And it's
scene.
also presented almost like it's very objective. Yes, it is not leering or anything like that.
It's almost, got like a carnage sort of nature,
like a
to
nature
it.
documentary.
Yeah, it's very, it's a little rough. You know what I mean? Because because of the fact
Especially
that
right
these
out of the
two
gate,
are-
you're like, whoa.
yeah, and I think it's not distasteful. I think it's purposeful.
No,
I
no,
think
no. Yeah.
It's to explain that they're both clamoring for power position left in this relationship. But really, at the end of it, it's, where do they go if not nowhere, almost, by the end of it? It's not, you see I'm gonna bring up a movie and you're gonna laugh. I was thinking about it because it's the last movie I think that we've had a sex scene ish sort of open up one of our movie series conversations. I was thinking about The Counselor, and I was thinking
Great
about I know, and I was just thinking about how, like, it's shot with the two most beautiful people on the planet, and it's very sexy, but then it's also purposeful for what it's going to be throughout the rest of this film. It's
Well, that one's
setting
shot
you up
like a
for-
perfume commercial. Ridley Scott can't help
Exactly.
himself.
This is not shot like that. This is shot like on a gritty camcorder, and obviously they're like decades apart.
Black
But
and white.
Yeah,
Kind of this low, unappealing angle.
Yeah, and it's not to say like, oh, this kind of sex is unappealing. It's
No, not at all.
it is no. And I'm not saying that you're saying that. I'm just saying it's shot in a way of saying that from the get-go, this isn't a romance movie. This is a breakup movie. This is a tragedy.
Mhm.
And from the get-go, this movie is telling its audience, buckle up, because this is the only kind of intimacy you're going to see in this movie, really. And it's rough. It's rough to watch because you're sitting there and going like, these people aren't in love anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're in love with the idea of
being in love,
not being lonely, and manipulating the other. At that point, they're more in the idea of when you're in a relationship of I told you so's and I'm right, rather than I love you. And it's completely heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking notion just from the opening frames. And yeah, I think this is a really, really good movie. And it is simple. And I'm glad that it is that way. And it's not beating its metaphor. It's not like telling you all this stuff. You still have to go and watch it and feel it and learn it and everything. It's very confident in what it's trying to do, even though it is a challenge for him. It's not clean, you know what I mean? But I think that, in some of its messy depictions too, I think that that's where you find complexity. So yeah, I think it's one of the better ones that we've done so far, and lives up to the reputation of being one of his better known films. So, Jay, talked to this movie for a little bit now. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this one up?
Those falls are called Iguazu Falls. You can find them at the border of Argentina and Brazil.
Thank you. I'm
very funny that you at first said Niagara Falls, but
I'm an
we're gonna move past
why
that.
I thought that. Yeah, it was my fault. I'm exhausted. So, and
honestly,
also,
I think I had in my notebook, which I don't have. I think I had the definitive take on this film. Unfortunately, I don't have that notebook, so I'm.
But do you remember it?
I kind of feel like no, I don't. It's a shame.
Oh.
We need to
Definitive take. We'll never know.
Yeah. It stinks, but I mean, I had several notes in there that I couldn't even. They blew my mind, and I wrote them. You know, so unfortunately, the world will never know those takes. But
what a freaking cop out by you!
But
hey, I had a lot of great notes. They're the best notes. Some of the best notes you'll ever hear.
So yes, everyone who is sitting here just thinking, man, Jay didn't really bring it today. Just know that's why. I would have just knocked it out of the park otherwise. But unfortunately, it is what it is.
You know what? No one's perfect, bud.
Yeah. Well, I'm only doing it in solidarity with the writers. I am not writing for myself.
Fair. All right. So nothing else. You have nothing else.
Iguazu Falls.
Okay, Iguazu Falls. Thank you very much for that.
You got it,
jerk. But yeah, I really like the film. I think obviously these performances are really great, Jay. These three central performances. I think the market sequence towards the end of the film, the needle drop, the placement of the Happy Together needle drop.
Classic Wong,
just using that song, and it cuts deeper the more it's played or the more you think about it.
And it cuts deeper because there's so much less of it in this movie.
Yeah. So when it's played, you're like, God, that hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And so just masterful. I think the way it looks is obviously I think it's stunning, and I think the way it's edited too is very effective. I mean,
just the weirdest editor. I love the way that his movies are edited. They're
too.
Crazy.
But also they just fit. They fit if anybody else, I don't think they would work. For him, it
is a tightrope walk for sure.
It is. Yeah. And I think that they're great. But yeah, ultimately, I think that I wouldn't call it an experiment, but it's a challenge that he presented to himself to make a drama about this subject matter in this kind of a love of this falling out love story, and he successfully does it. And he instead of making it about love, he makes it about loneliness and tragedy. And I think that's kind of special. So yeah, one of my favorites so far that we've done.
It's awesome. So. To quote Borat, very nice. Very, very nice.
Well, I think JD Duran has seen this. If he hasn't, he'll have thoughts soon upon our Letterboxd page at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm. And with that, that's going to do it for this show here. We should be back.
This is where we're stopping. We're not doing any more.
Yeah, we're never talking about it. No.
Actually, should we just skip the next one?
No, I don't think you can, because a lot of people are going to look forward to our thoughts on In the Mood for Love.
All right, fine. We'll do it.
A movie that I think that there's a lot to talk about in that movie, and I can't wait to speak on it. I mean, it's considered by Sight and Sound now one of the greatest films of all time.
It's definitely in the top 10. I want to say it's way up
top 10
3 or something. I know
it's high. Yeah, it's like in the top 10 for sure, at least maybe top 5. It's high up there. So we're going to talk about that either next week or sometime. We'll find time to talk about it for sure. Well, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, you can like, review, subscribe to us. Tell us what you think about Happy Together here in the comments. If you're listening to us on the podcast form, you can follow us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the podcast platforms. We're out there. You can go to InSessionFilm.com. You can become a Patreon at patreon.com/InSessionFilm. You can go to InSession Film Store, get t-shirts. We're going to have a bunch of new t-shirts coming out, mugs, all that different kind of stuff. InSession Film app is $1.99 in your app store. You can get that. A bunch of ways you can just go support us over. Or just go to the website and read our reviews. New website.
Who this?
Yeah, and there's a ton of great writers and everybody that's doing work out there. I know this coming weekend we will be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Brendan and I will be doing that, as well as Brendan and I will be doing the main show this week, while Jay and JD are on vacation out of town. And we're going to be talking about Marvel films. Specifically, we'll be ranking Marvel films. Probably giving our own rankings.
I love
we won't
a
be doing
ranking exercise. I hate
Me
it.
too. Probably somewhere along top 5, top 10, somewhere along that way. But that should be a lot of fun. But we will be back. We're in the mood for love.
To talk about, I looked it up. Number 5 on the site and
Number
sound
5.
poll.
There
One
it
spot
is.
above a little movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey. So no pressure.
No pressure at all when talking about that film next time. But until then, we will see you all next time.